Shalom, I'm Rabbi Michael Panitz. I'm the Rabbi of Temple Israel of Norfolk, Virginia, and I have the honor to be speaking to you from the pulpit of my congregation. This is the last message I'll be sharing with you before the Jewish holiday of Pesach, of Passover, and so it is a message designed for our enhanced understanding of one of the key components of Passover, the component of matzah, unleavened bread. Probably flatbread was the original meaning of it, but we call it unleavened bread. And my message is called Both Sides of the Flatbread. Why do we eat matzah on Passover? The most famous reason, taught in the Passover Haggadah and faithfully repeated in Sunday school lessons, derives from Exodus chapter 12, verse 39, quote, "And they baked matzah cakes of the dough that they had taken out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, since they had been driven out of Egypt and could not delay, nor had they prepared any provisions for themselves." There is something viscerally arresting about that image. Israelites hastening out of the land where they had been enslaved, not waiting for the morning dough to rise, but rather packing it in their kneading bowls, strapping those bowls to their shoulders, and walking eastward from Goshen toward the Sea of Reeds, with the hot Egyptian sun baking the dough into matzah. But the implications of that explanation are a bit off, if we think about it. We take an accident and turn it into a ritual. Is that normally the origin of a ritual? I think not. This reminds me of the old Jewish joke. In one synagogue, it was the practice of each person upon coming down the aisle to bow deeply as he would cross a particular row of pews. People did not know why, and therefore they argued about the origin of the practice. Finally, they sought out the grand old man of the synagogue, the sole surviving member to have been active prior to the last renovation of the sanctuary. And he explained, in the olden days, there was a low-hanging chandelier just there. To get past it, one had to bow. And so we bow at that place until today. There are stronger reasons than mere intuition to doubt that the leaving in haste explanation is the entire story. When we examine the laws of the sacrificial system in the Bible, we see that unleavened rather than leavened bread was standard fare. Leviticus chapter 2, verses 11 through 13. Quote, "Any grain offering that you bring forward to the Lord shall not be made leavened, for you shall not turn to smoke any leaven, nor any honey from it, as a fire offering to the Lord. You may bring them forward to the Lord as an offering of first yield, but they shall not go up on the altar as a fragrant odor. And every offering of your grain you shall season with salt." Since the Passover meal in Egypt was thought of as a sacrifice, it would be consistent with the entire tradition of Jewish ritual to stipulate that the bread consumed at that meal should be matzah and not chametz. And so it was. The commandment regarding the meal that the Israelites were to consume on the night of the 10th plague, the night before the Exodus, specified unleavened and not leavened bread. Quote, Exodus chapter 12, verse 8. "They," meaning the whole community of Israel, "shall eat the meat," meaning of an unblemished lamb, "on this night, fire roasted with flatbread, matzot. On bitter herbs shall they eat it." According to this verse, the reason for eating matzah is not haste. The commandment to have that meal was issued on the first day of the month, Exodus chapter 12, verse 1. The Israelites knew 2 weeks in advance that they would be eating matzah at the, quote, Passover of Egypt. What we have minimally is two traditions, both with the cachet of biblical. The narrative tradition locating the origin of matzah consumption on Passover as the product of the suddenness of the departure, and the cultic, legal tradition, not focused on the specifics of the departure from Egypt and mandating matzah for sacrificial meals in general. My students know that pedagogically I sometimes seek to decenter, to shake our preconceptions loose from their moorings, and then afterwards to re-establish our knowledge on a broader base. That is what I hope to help you do now as well. Granted that we have two traditions, not one voice, in our Bible regarding the reason for eating matzah on Passover, we could leave it at that and take comfort in the fact that the Bible is broad enough to accommodate different recollections. The narrative tradition focused on the haste of the departure, whereas the legal tradition emphasized that matzah, not chametz, is the ritually correct form of bread to be eaten with sacrificial meat. But there is a connection between the two traditions. The connection is the simplicity and rapidity of baking matzah. Let us recall some other places in the Bible where matzah is mentioned. In the Sodom and Gomorrah story, Lot serves matzah to the angels. Quote, Genesis 19, verse 3. He, meaning Lot, pressed them, meaning the angels, hard, meaning to accept his hospitality. And they turned aside to him and came into his house, and he prepared them a feast and baked flatbread, matzot, and they ate. By contrast with the sumptuous loaves of semolina flour that Abraham had Sarah prepare for those same angels one chapter earlier, Genesis 18, verse 6, Lot's bread of hospitality is the plain daily bread of the people of that region. Is that meant to suggest that Lot's hospitality was less commendable than Abraham's? Perhaps. Or perhaps it was just a sign that Lot was hosting them on short notice. We don't have to be big fans of Lot to exonerate him for serving matzah in this instance. Gideon, a righteous judge, served matzah in the meal he made for the angel. Quote, Judges 8, verse 19. Gideon went in and prepared a kid and baked unleavened bread from an ephah of flour. Further evidence of the commonplace nature of matzah when serving a guest on short notice, the witch woman of Endor, taking pity on King Saul in his state of nervous prostration, makes him a meal of a hastily slaughtered stall-fed calf and matzah. 1 Samuel chapter 29, verse 4. Perhaps she was a witch, but she was still a Jewish mother. Her response to the man's distress was to feed him. There's something so touching in that. Matzah, therefore, is bread made quickly, whether it is the product of haste or not. Thus, the Passover of Egypt featured the daily bread of the Israelites of that time and place. It remained the daily bread of indigenous peoples there until almost the present day, as we see in the accompanying photograph showing a Bedouin woman preparing matzah in 1895. What emerges is an intriguing blend of the ordinary and the extraordinary, the social and the sacred. Matzah may have been exactly what one would have expected at such a meal, or it may have been adventitious, but at the end of the processing of our multifaceted tradition, it has graduated from substance to symbol. It has come to bear added significance. Matzah is not either or, it is both and. It is both the daily bread, for whose gift we thank God, and the holiday bread, connected to the anniversary of the birth of our nation. It is both the lechem oni, the bread of affliction, and also the bread of liberation. The different voices in our tradition are not only a consolation to us when we ourselves differ in our understanding of Judaism, those different voices are also, individually and together, sources of inspiration. Chag Kasher v'Sameach, a happy and kosher Passover festival to all.